Well, welcome to week 5. This is lesson 1, and really excited to talk to you all today about one of my favorite subjects, which is epigenetics. And we've talked a little bit about that in past lessons, but today we're really going to do a deeper dive into what that means and how it relates to chronic stress and autoimmune health. Okay, so like I said, today we're going to begin exploring epigenetics, which is a powerful area of science that helps explain how your environment, emotions, and habits can actually influence the way that your genes function. And this topic is deeply empowering for anyone with autoimmune illness because it shows that while we may have genetic predispositions, we are not defined by them. Epigenetics basically is the study of how gene expression can be turned either on or off, not by changing the genes themselves, but by modifying how they're activated. So think of your DNA as the script and epigenetics as the director deciding which parts get to read. Unlike traditional genetics, epigenetics is influenced by lifestyle, environment, past experiences, and of course, past stress and traumas, which means we can literally influence it through how we live and care for ourselves. A common myth is it runs in my family, so I'm stuck with it, right? Nothing I can do about it. But here's the truth. Genes can predispose you, but they don't predetermine you. Epigenetics reminds us that your story isn't over just because of your DNA. By changing inputs like nutrition, stress, mindset, healthy boundaries, right, we can influence which genes get activated and how intensely. Research is now showing that our genes play less of a role in how we develop than we previously thought, and that most characteristics, predispositions, and hereditary factors are controlled by epigenetics. This is such huge information, right? So let's talk a little bit more about this. Genes are like instructions written on your DNA, but just because the instruction exists doesn't mean it's being used. Epigenetics is the science of how your body decides which genes to read and when. So imagine your DNA is a cookbook. Epigenetics doesn't rewrite the recipes. It simply decides which ones are open on the counter and which ones stay closed on the shelf, right? Which ones are we going to use? Sorry, my dog has joined us again. There are two major, Samson, chill, buddy. There are two major ways your body switches these genes on or off. And one is through DNA methylation, which is kind of a gene off switch. So small chemical tags called methyl groups attached to your DNA. And these tags act like sticky notes saying, do not read this page. So if a helpful gene, like one that reduces inflammation, gets methylated, the body may lose access to its protective effects, right? The body's telling it, don't mess with this, don't turn this on. On the flip side, methylation can help silence harmful or overactive genes, like those promoting autoimmunity or chronic inflammation. Another really interesting thing here about regulation is the histone modification, which we refer to also as kind of the volume control. Basically what that means is your DNA is wrapped around proteins called histones, and these can tighten or loosen to control access to the gene. So when the DNA is tightly coiled, it's hard for your body to read the gene. It's kind of like a page that's glued shut. When it loosens, the gene becomes more readable and active. And this matters because this tightening and loosening is influenced by factors such as what you eat, how much you sleep, your trauma and stress history, exposure to toxins, and whether you feel safe or if you feel constantly stressed. So I know there was a lot to kind of cover, but the takeaway is these genes, right, are hugely impacted by the way we live our lives, right? We're not just predetermined by our DNA. These genes are heavily influenced, whether they turn on or off, by so many environmental and biological and socio-biological factors. Okay, so everything from sleep and food to social connection and stress affects your gene expression. Even small changes like reducing exposure to toxins, improving your gut health, or practicing breath work can lead to measurable changes in inflammation, hormone regulation, and immune function. These aren't abstract ideas, they're biologically science-based shifts. So speaking of science, studies now show that epigenetic modifications are linked to diseases like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, and Hashimoto's. So for example, trauma and chronic stress can suppress genes that regulate inflammation while activating those that promote it. Nutrient deficiencies and exposure to environmental toxins can have similar effects. But healing environments, which is what we're focusing on, right? Nourishment, rest, safety, these things can help reverse or calm these changes. And I just want to take a moment right here and pause because, we're getting close to being halfway through this program. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but the symptoms of chronic stress and PTSD, right, are curable. And I'm surprised a lot of times that people come to the office and they don't know that, but it's true. It really is curable through these things that we're talking about. So, keep that in mind as we're going forward. I don't want you to feel like this is something you're always going to be stuck with and have to manage. PTSD, symptoms of chronic stress, it is curable. And when you cure that, right, when you're managing that well, obviously it has a huge effect on your physical body and your body's ability to not be in a state of dysregulation and inflammation, right? And that's where we see the healing process happening in autoimmune disorders. Okay, so here are key lifestyle areas that shape your epigenetic expression. Of course, diet and nutrient density, emotional stress and trauma, physical activity and movement, sleep quality, environmental exposures such as exposure to toxins, mold, smoke, social connection and perceived sense of safety. And each one offers an entry point for healing. Not all at once, right? But gently, layer by layer, right? Each of these things continue to build on our sense of connection and safety and healing. So chronic stress activates the HPA axis. We've talked about that before, leading to high cortisol and suppressed immunity. So over time, this alters gene expression related to inflammation, energy, and immune signaling. But the good news is stress reduction practices, like what we're learning, breath work, somatic work, mindfulness, right, can help recalibrate these signals and change what your body hears from the environment. Nutrients are like little chemical messengers that speak to your genes. So antioxidants, B vitamins, and omega-3s can turn on genes that support healing and turn off those related to inflammation. And that's why we talked before about nutrition, how important that is. So this is why an anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense diet isn't just about symptom relief. It is a form of gene-level communication with your body. So early trauma, another factor here, right, doesn't just shape behavior. It can shape gene expression. But here's the powerful part. Resilience also leaves an imprint. And I know that if you are here, if you are showing up and doing this work, you already are resilient. So I already know that about you. But now let's put that into work for your healing. So practices that help you build on that resiliency to feel safe and connected and empowered can create epigenetic changes that promote repair, not just for you, but possibly for future generations. So your healing really matters more than you know. You might have heard about generational trauma, right? And how that can be passed down through the years. You doing this work right now, right? This is setting up for future generations. If you decide to have children, or even if you already do, just the way you're modeling and taking care of your body can have a huge impact on them as well. So when we understand epigenetics, we move from helplessness to hope. You are not broken and your body is not the enemy here. Through constant, consistent, gentle shifts, you can reduce inflammation, improve your symptoms, or alleviate them altogether, and support gene expression that serves your healing. So it's not about controlling everything, it's about creating those conditions for this healing to happen. So take a moment and choose one change that you'd like to make this week, this month, right, that could positively affect your health. It could be things like reducing sugar or adding a 10-minute walk or practicing some of the tools we've learned with breath work or body scanning or somatic experiencing. Maybe it's saying no to things that cause you stress, setting some better boundaries, right? These small changes done consistently support your epigenetic healing, and that is vital. Okay, so let's end with this powerful question. What beliefs about your body are shifting now that you know your genes can change, right? I think that is such a wild concept because I don't know about you all, but growing up and until I started doing this work, I didn't know that. I thought you got your genes kind of when you're born and that's it, right? But learning that that's not true, that epigenetics, our environment and how we respond plays such a huge part of how we develop. That's really life changing, right? It gives you so much more power over even reversing these things. So think about that for a second. What beliefs about your body are shifting now that you know that, now that you have this information? Are you beginning to see yourself as more capable, more adaptive, more empowered to partner with your biology? Let this reflection guide your next steps. And don't forget to complete our companion worksheets. That's going to help you, again, just dig a little deeper into this work and your knowledge of epigenetics and how it personally affects you and your ability to promote positive change in your gene expression. So again, this is one of my absolute favorite subjects. I could do a whole program just on epigenetics. So thank you for being here, and congratulations on doing this work and learning these things about yourself and how your body works. You are certainly on the right track to healing. So I'll look forward to seeing you in our next lesson, which will be week 5, lesson 2. See you soon.